Tear away a finger, hack off a hand, an arm, a face. Keep on taking and see what grins back at you.
Hey all, Siege here, and today I want to talk about an idea in Isleweaver Nessie very casually mentions. And after really considering what she's saying, the precise choice of words, mind you, I've not been able to get it out of my mind. Specifically where she tells us, tear away a finger, hack off a hand, an arm, a face, keep on taking and see what grins back at you. This bit of dialogue has really sparked a lot of intrigue for me personally because I think it specifically calls out the few who have been first wronged by the Orkin in one way or another, but more importantly, are the ones the Void has taken an interest in specifically and is actually calling these characters out, offering information in order to determine who these characters are. Now, some are pretty easy to figure out. Clearly, in the first portion, she is referring to Albrecht taking the Indifference's finger, this being done in their very first meeting, seemingly confirmed within Requiem dialogue. Not just being spoken about, but shown in the various images. The visage of a hand reaching towards Entrati, calling him by a name he hadn't heard in so very long. Little Bengal, from a voice he could easily recall from his childhood. And this encounter is one that's quite familiar to all of us.
Something's out there, kiddo. Watching us.
Now Albrecht, horrified by his own image, staring dead-eyed and most likely smiling right back at him, ran from the encounter, at least to his knowledge and ours by extension. Because to this day, his exit from this untimed door really isn't described. A glaring omission amongst the stories revealed in the hidden Requiem placements, if you ask me. He required the bell to get through, but on the way in, emotions got the best of him.
The bell around me flexed like a rat paralyzed in a winding, gulping snake. I faltered in the awe of it, stumbling against the ceraglass, and with that, shifted the bell's path through the wall. It grazed the caliper membrane, the edge of the door. No worldly edge was as thin, as sharp as could split even light. As the bell faintly grazed it, the ceraglass was all at once rendered like strips of flesh by Dak's blade. My enclosure was beheaded in an instant, but still I fell, sideways, into the void.
Now, after what would seem like catastrophic damage to his encasement, as well as what happened with the void interaction, somehow he made it back out by himself.
With the shred of wit that remained, I decided that I should run for my life. At once, crazed and frantic, I fled. But I made no forward progress. Instead, the world compressed ever more around me, as though I were an anchor pulling the shore to reach. When I arrived at the door, or rather, the door arrived at me, I howled, hurling myself inside, out. And then and there I was, lost and unlost, howling on the floor in harmony with my wretched Kalimos, lacerated in flesh and heart, scattered as the bell glass, spilling blood and stomach on the cold stone floor.
No bell. No real protection. Desperately calling for Illyria to close the door, and in the aftermath, he mentions his face specifically needing significant repair after the incident. Now, don't get me wrong, the Orkin were absolutely capable at this point of healing him, but Albrecht's first interaction with the Void lacks quite a lot of detail, and given what we know the Void does, his initial Doppelgangers' confirmed existence, and dialogue Eleanor offers regarding Void clones that don't seem to know they are clones, even taking on the original behaviors and, more importantly, interests of its hosts. Meaning, it's very possible these clones are actively working against the Void as much as they work for it. And to me, that's an incredible detail that may even offer us insight into what I consider the Void Trinity argument.
There are two creatures that look very much like you out there. Find the wholesome one and keep the other at bay.
That there are, in fact, three of potentially both of us. In our case, it's confirmed. We have the drifter, the operator, and the operator's void entity. But in Albrecht's case, we only see two. However, Isleweaver actually describes her father in the void, seemingly trapped.
Oh, Lloyd, I had the most distressing dream.
Here we go again.
The wall of Loke was before us. I had my proofs. My father's. I could hear him. I could hear him tapping at the untimed door.
Mother?
We went in, but again, he wasn't there. It was just a dream.
We come to quickly learn that that wasn't necessarily the case.
No, Mother. You did all of that. You're as wormed as the rest of this place.
And given his rather odd change in appearance, going from an older man having a more traditional Orcan look to this more svelte, younger variation, something mere healing wouldn't necessarily facilitate. Is it possible we just haven't yet found his drifter figure? The two variations we've witnessed merely being no different than the operator and its doppelganger. Can you imagine the true Albrecht, potentially desperate to escape from his void prison, with the one we see completely oblivious to his plight, never questioning for a second that he may in fact be a void-rendered facsimile with Albrecht's intentions and memories fully intact? And what's worse, he may not even know the original one exists still, much like us with the Drifter for so very long. Albrecht's very odd new ability set, after the fact, might merely be pointing to the very real possibility that, in essence, he is no different from us, and I feel would actually match up with how Nessie describes her encounter with the operator, according to one of 3 death notes positioned within Scholar's Landing, in pointing out the void that lies within us, just as it lies within the Queen of Duviri, as Major Rizalka has crowned herself, and the idea that she is fully intent on keeping this little piece of information secret. It's one thing to speculate on this sort of thing. It's another thing altogether to be certain of what's going on. And she would know, as in the aforementioned passage, she is the one who has lost an arm. And in this instance, she is again blaming the Orcan for the creation of the techrot. Not only did she lose her arm because of it, but the inhaler she's commonly seen with was necessary to ease the pain of the techrot that had settled within her lungs. It's interesting that she says the void held her severed arm out and offered her life. Does this in fact mean she offered it to the void, and in turn it cured her as a byproduct of becoming one of her heralds? One would assume the void could have replaced her arm, but instead she has this metal contraption in its place. And in my opinion, this was the cost for her gifts. Which leaves us with 2 others that aren't necessarily as easy to place, and as such are maybe a bit more up to interpretation. So keep that in mind moving forward. First, the hand. Well, there are in fact 2 that might fit this description. The maybe less obvious of those would be that of Parvos Granum. Yes, the true Corpus founder who initially seemed to be only trapped in the void, a victim of the Orcan first and then his own board, them having the void drive on his personal transport sabotaged. The intent, his swift and permanent death. But almost as if he knew this to be a possibility, knew the method specifically, he had just so happened to have previously commissioned Ballast to create a purpose-built warframe configured with time dilation capabilities. And these very powers, while turning his beloved Protea into a specter in the process, provided Parvos protection within a pocket void space, one he would lay dormant within, until of course, we freed him. Now, the Corpus were known for their praise of the void for profit, but I believe most assume this to be the colloquial pray to the cosmos for money, aka asking God to win the lottery, if you will, and not necessarily to be taken literally, but in recent years, his following of a particular voice he calls desire.
A whisper I strain to hear, in a tongue not of man, but of something else, something grandeur, a language I understood instinctively, the language of desire. It said, "Fear not poverty. Poverty is the bitter soil in which sweet desire blossoms."
One that allowed him to navigate out of poverty and servitude from the orc and even come to match them later in his existence through, of all things, trade, and eventually allowed him to empower others to carry out his doctrine through investment. This is the lifeblood of the Corpus Society. Money begets money, and with enough money, as most of us already know, all things are possible because, quite literally, everyone has a price. Now, I know some may claim that to be false, but they just haven't seen the bright sun yet. Haven't dreamed big enough. Had they? Well, let's be real. There's something out there that everyone desires. It's just figuring out what that is, and then, well, you know the rest of the story. If nothing else, it's really hard to ignore that the entirety of the Corpus hierarchy, history, and premise is based upon deals. Giving money to others to obtain influence and, if successful enough, incredible power, as we are shown with the unassailable fact that after the collapse, they are the only faction in the current universe that isn't scrounging for a living, instead appearing to live in abundance. Well, the upper crust at least. Their society very much matching that of the Orcan hierarchy, just created differently, with its initial growth based on usefulness, not birthright. Amazingly enough, the Corpus's ideals seem to be in line with that of the prosperity gospel, postulating one's wealth as a direct sign of divine favor. What's interesting about this is the tenets by which the Corpus exists were oddly enough proposed to Parvos in light whispers he would hear throughout aspects of his life, applying what the voice had suggested and, interestingly enough, seeming to always end up on top, profiting greatly in the process, mimicking the effects of heavy insider information. For a long time, it was believed this was no more than the voice within his head, if you will, but Dante Unbound brought with it further information regarding a very disturbing reality. That somehow, Parvos understands Void Tongue.
Dante ventured to the deafeningly silenced halls of the doomed Entrati lineage, encountering automated defenses gone senile and violent, chanting in an unright dialect that slurred thought and annihilated hope. That wrong-tongued language invaded Dante's mind, infecting it with the one thing he was defenseless against, the promise of knowledge. It may be said that a parasite is life from without the body, fighting to exist within the body, despite the body, even as it risks the body. What, then, do we call knowledge from beyond our reality, demanding to be let in? Poor Dante. If only he had recited to me sooner the wrong-tongued words he had heard. I could have told him, you know, that I had heard that language before. Once, long ago, from the lips of Parvos Granum.
Something we currently even believe Albrecht and Trotty do not fully comprehend. Within this same update, Parvos is searching for artifacts within Entrati's labs, and with this new revelation, associated context regarding his desire and his own corpus doctrine, literally founded on the concept that praising the void would provide profit, not to mention the deocentric society he created. Well, in my opinion, it provides an overwhelmingly plausible scenario where his hand may have been the one offered to see what grins back from the void.
Sister.
Within these tenets, while it does say the Orcan took his hand, that doesn't necessarily mean they kept it, as that terminology is commonly used when a limb is lost, not just confiscated. So in this case, I would assume, like most, Parvos would have at least attempted to retrieve his lost limb, and if so, may have utilized his impressive resourcefulness and will. Lest we forget, he also made it home with a burning chunk of rubido in his stomach, carrying it back and, if this is accurate, offering his flesh. Of course, there is a second option that's probably more familiar, that being our very own Lotus. Known to have had her hand severed during the New War, a hand that has had quite the journey in its own right, being the very thing to offer the Drifter, the operator's power. Even after restoring her through Archon shards, the words from her own father, at least at this point, appear to ring more true than any of us want to believe.
I have wallowed here. It is true. Fading in this deep hole, waiting to die, but without release. Held here by a purpose I cannot abandon. That she is free. So no, they cannot have her. But hear me, even if I help you, even if by some miracle you succeed, she will not be the same. Even for us, death leaves a mark.
But what all does that mark entail? And is it responsible for her odd response after defeating Ballas in regards to the indifference?
Nothing.
Or the downright shocking admission she makes in Lotus Eaters?
You, my child, the great indifference wants to take. I want to let it.
What's really unsettling is this may only scratch the surface, as dialogue exists suggesting she's been tied to it for much longer than that, with her admission within the Ropalolis fight. But I've long thought about what Alad V remarks during the second dream.
Sweet prophet, the moon exists. It was in the void all along. I knew the Lotus was powerful, but this, she erased history. We thought it was destroyed all this time. My Lotus, you make a fine villain.
Somehow, some way, he believed this was her power.
Lua, the miracle. Do you understand what it cost?
Well, she may be confirming that, yes, she was the one using it. It didn't necessarily come from her. And within that concept, well, a lot about the power of the Lotus seems far outside the parameters of typical sentience. While she has been said to have the power of a sentient Mother Pergasa, we really don't know much of Pergasa's capabilities. Yet this gift is lauded by Era as incredibly special. And while it may be, the specifics of what Pergasa can achieve aren't really specified, and unlike Hunhao, she doesn't offer any kind of indications of her own condition, so it's tough to know what exactly the Lotus is capable of from her. But it's what Era states during the prelude to the New War that really stands out.
But you have something our people have never had before in the Tar. You're stained by their wickedness. Use it. Use their sin against them.
He knew the same presence that resides within the Tenno and within Rizalka was with her as well. And I feel like this is just too similar to what we know of Nessie and the Operator. This glory being the product of void influence. And under these pretenses, we have the likely suspects here of Albrecht, Nessie, and either or both, I guess, of the Lotus and Parvos Granum, because it really does work in both instances. And that leaves us with just one more. And it may finally give us an answer to one of the greatest mysteries within Warframe.
You know what it gave. But what did you promise it in return?
I've often found it odd that while we see Entradi's doppelganger able to shift personalities literally on the fly, our own in all this time has never once done this, at least as far as we know. It made me consider the very real possibility that in this case, with our operator, we may have offered ourselves in payment. The reason why the Void wants us back. See, under this thinking, what occurred in this scene with the Tenno variants seemingly falling to their death may in fact be all the other variants, leaving only the Drifter and our full Void copy, meant to do its bidding specifically, in every way cutting off our own face and giving ourselves in the process, as a person's face is typically the determining factor in identifying someone in any meaningful way. In this instance, our light taken completely. If true, the frustration we see from the indifference in numerous situations would fit the understanding of this copy turning against its wishes for some reason. The operator, according to her, was a herald, meant to destroy the Orcan, which, in fact, they did. Well, most of them at least. But something happened, something even the Void could not anticipate, and I think it was Rel's sacrifice. When Rel bound himself to the Hero Warframe in its infernal chains, he somehow trapped what I believe to be the third aspect of the indifference, the true herald, the Dark Tenno, as Mathila put it. But this sacrifice, in my opinion, the influence of the Void was, say, lessened within our operators, and potentially throughout the galaxy, as we really don't see much of the Man on the Wall, with it really becoming active only after the Chains of Hero has been completed, and thus allowed them to make their own choices, see the world for what it really was, and
dream. Not of what you are, but of what you want to be.
These are the exact words of our own Lotus, and I believe them to have originated from Margulis, allowing this Void copy the ability to be the child it was originated from, rather than the monster it was created to be. And more, I'm starting to wonder if Eleanor wasn't trying to clue us into this fact, as she's already put this together in the aforementioned passage, remarking in reply to the existence of the Holdfast. How do we know it's the same person in there? The same point of view? What if it's just, I don't know, a Void clone or something? Could that happen? The Void taking the idea of a person and giving form to it. And that form then thinks it's the same person as the one who died. More concerning, there is another bit of dialogue where they discuss the deal, and well, it really only strengthens the argument. The Drifter goes on to tell her, "You just reminded me of something back on the Zariman. The first time I met the Indifference. I didn't know what it was then, of course. I remember what it said, though. I said it could take my light, and it grinned at me and said, 'Thanks, kiddo. I think I will.'" Oh hell, you're giving me chills. The devil is a stickler for the letter of the law in all the old folk tales. Do you think it thinks you've pledged something to it? Your light. It says we made a deal, so I guess it thinks I owe it something. I know one thing about it, at least. It plays games. The concerning part of all this isn't that our operator could be one of these clones, rather that if it is, and the Void entity is always a part of them, what are they doing while we utilize the Drifter? They are clearly two different individuals with different personalities, with the Drifter even remarking upon this idea of the kid's free will at the same time as their own, and knowing that it is within and can take control. Well, what exactly is it doing in the background while we're not with them? Is it possible that the final scene in Whispers in the Walls, where we are shown the reveal of Albrecht's doppelganger next to ours, is actually portraying our operator under its control? How would we be able to know for sure? Probably the worst part of this little theory is that, in all honesty, the operator would most likely be the one most would assume the last portion of Nessie's phrase is speaking about. But being that this is speculation in all rights, the person who hacked off a face could be others. Could very well be Minerva or Velimir. Given his personality and confirmation of Void contact, I would also say Lloyd falls squarely within the realm of possibilities. And with everything that's gone on with his involvement in so much of our actions post Whispers on the Walls, well, who exactly are we serving? Is this why Lloyd was okay with us pilfering in Trotty's labs for Parvos? The Cavia are in a similar situation after Lloyd attempted to correct their void sickness and in return received entities twice encountered by the void, twice saved if you think about it. So who drives their ambition, especially now? We know Nessie was persuaded by a spider. Should we be concerned that the hacked face might come from Eleanor or even Letty? Both having encounters with spiders they desperately needed to share with us. Very coincidental in timing, no less. It's not often we get such a definitive clue from the indifference regarding, by all logic, who specifically it has corrupted, and I feel like this phrase will become much more relevant in the near future. But what do you think? Who are the ones specifically called out in her dialogue? I'll be curious to hear these answers. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video and it got you wondering if you should maybe spend more time with your operator. I know it's hard with all the best fashion stuff going to the Drifter, as well as the amazing connections we were able to cultivate from the kinematic instant messenger, but perhaps it's time to see what the other one is up to. Regardless, if you decide to or not,
Don't be jealous of Nessie, kiddo. I'll still wear your face.
I suppose if there is a silver lining here, we'd only have one operator to worry about, right? At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.